All right, well, welcome everybody. We're really excited to talk to you today. My name is Josh Francia. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Blueshift. Blueshift is the world's leading smart hub customer data platform. And today I'm joined by Kenny Kim, Chief Marketing Officer of Udacity. So Kenny, welcome. Really excited to talk to you today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been amazing, and really thank you for the time.
Absolutely. So our main topic that we're going to talk about today is, consumers' increasing expectations of online learning. Now, no one better to answer that question than you, Kenny, as you are in the forefront of this. Obviously, Udacity, a premier leading brand of online learning in the world, right? Across many, many different countries and different demographics. So talk to us a little bit about, this has been a crazy couple, a year and a half, almost 2 years now. How have students' expectations changed for online learning during these, last, 18 months to 2 years?
Well, certainly, and I guess I'll start, Josh, by saying, not just being the CMO here at Udacity, but also being the parents of two school-age kids,
right,
and having nieces all the way up through college. I think what you kind of learn, not just from being on my side, but also being a parent with kids learning from school at home. Like, one, just in general, people are the general public's amenable to it. I don't think you need folks to you don't really need to explain online learning anymore in a way, just like virtual, these virtual webinars now are just something that's second nature, right? And to the point where my kids use Zoom as a verb.
Yeah, right.
So that's one. And then two, beyond the amenability, I think from a degree perspective, right? There's a come to Jesus moment that a lot of folks have around, is their degree going to be enough? I was fortunate enough to come out at an unprecedented time of unemployment with a psychology degree. But is that liberal arts degree, during a unprecedented time, going to be enough, for when it comes to jobs of the future, right? And from a learning perspective, beyond just the amenability and hey, learning that you want to capture digital skills outside of the work, outside of your school, is the post-COVID effect. If there's anything I've learned, right, or any parent has learned at home, is that passively consuming content, like one way through a screen, is a terrible way to learn, let alone job-ready digital skills, which is what we focus on, right? So switching, you can't just convert syllabi onto a laptop and lectures and then have people take quizzes, right? It needs to be more than that. There's a proliferation of options, and then finally, with that passive interaction, I think people are yearning for different ways for human interaction, right? Yeah. So how do you put in those human aspects to get people to feel connected or be unblocked when they hit a problem they can't struggle with? When I took a math course in college, it wasn't a multiple choice exam. You had to fill out those problems. And the best way to go about it wasn't sending a note to your professor, was actually going to office hours and have that TA review that work and go into you. And I think that level, how do you get that human connection in online learning is critical.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I also have school-aged kids, and I definitely agree with, you can't just put the lesson plan digital format on a slide and say, hey, go to it and figure it out. Learning doesn't happen that way. It's very different. And so, obviously the objective of teachers, the objective of institutions is to provide learning, right? When learning occurs, they're being successful. And so how do they translate that for the digital medium, for the online medium? It's very different, right? And so I think you brought up a couple of good points of, people still want and still need some layer of interactivity, human interaction. And so they're not just kind of lost to their own devices. It's not a, study alone or learn by yourself type of thing, right? It's learn with someone. So how is Udacity thinking about it? What are some ways that you guys are doing to provide that level of interaction, provide that level of expectations that the student
completely, right? So I would say we were fortunate enough to have a founder in Sebastian, I think, who realized this 10 years ago. right?
Yeah.
And I can't believe it's been 10 years, but like, if you're going to sort of leverage the online space as the medium, right, to sort of learn something new, let alone a sort of like digital employable skill, right, that you have to make it more interactive, right? And our sort of learning platform is a combination of short projects or short lectures, interactive quizzes, and then actual project, what we call project-based learning. And a lot of folks are coining that term now, but I think, for us, it's experiential learning and leaned in that you're learning by doing. So, and doing something that replicates the real world environment. So for example, in our self-driving course, the final project has you program a car that we have in a parking lot, right? And you have to actually program that course to go through it. For our digital marketing course, you're actually in AdWords, you're in Facebook ads, developing those campaigns, and that tangibility is critical. Outside of that, from a human, the human interaction aspect, we partnered and we've developed this, what we call a mentor network. So we have 1,400 mentors that we sort of labeled it or like qualified as experts in the field that you're learning, right? And these mentors have worked for companies such as Google, Uber, Facebook, the FANG companies,
Right.
Salesforce. They're actually practitioners. They do this for a living, right? And I talked about my TA sort of example just now, but when there's no one way to answer a sort of question technically to prove that you understand it, right? Just like there's no one way to make a pizza dough. There's a recipe, but then there's probably a number of different ways. And what the mentors do is two very critical things. One, they unblock you when you hit a roadblock. So let's sort of say I'm programming that car and there's something, there might be something wrong with my compiler or something. They can help you with that. Or there's an error you have in your code. And then two, they verify by reviewing your project submission that you can apply those skill sets and that you've learned it, right? And I think that's super critical in the space of online learning, because there's different ways people learn. There's different ways that people will apply that material, right? And I don't think a sort of multiple choice exam or like a paint by numbers project where they show you, hey, here's the project, now go fill in circle 1 with blue and fill in circle 2 with red, which some projects do,
right,
is not necessarily an effective way to train users or to like grasp those materials. And then finally, we hold it at a high bar. Like, we 40% of these mentors have a master's degree or PhD. The admissions rate for people that apply for this is less than 10%. So it's on par with Ivy Leagues. And most importantly, in the online sort of space, these people are looking for feedback quickly, right? So we guarantee a response time of less than an hour when you sort of submit an inquiry.
So I love that. And I love it particularly because there's, when you learn a new skill, when anyone wants to learn a new skill, I want to program in a car is what digital marketing or something like that. There's obviously the knowledge gap that happens, right? You say, well, I don't know anything about it, so I have to learn, right? And so let me read and take quizzes and do these assessments to understand the education. But then there's the applicability concept of it. So have I learned enough to actually execute and be doing the thing that I'm trying to do? And then I think when you're pairing that with real world practitioners, you actually get the confirmation that your applicable skills are real, right?
Yeah.
That is so valuable, because if you're taking this course, you're trying to up level yourself, you're trying to up level your skills. Maybe you got a degree in psychology and you want to be a programmer, right? Well, you can't just go in and say, hey, I took this course and I have this thing, show me. You actually have to have the applicability. You have to have the confidence that you know how to do and how to interact in that arena. And those mentors that you talk about provide that layer of confirmation and guidance. Say, hey, not only do you have the skills, you also know how to apply them. I think that's amazing, right? I think that's so valuable.
Completely, right? And I don't know what your career journey was, but like I said, I was a psychology major. And I started out as a web developer. I took one CS course in undergrad, and I learned on the job, learned by doing. And my mentor was my boss, who was reviewing my work. Right. And and same when I made the transition to marketing, I got hired by a marketer who felt he could teach me the requisite materials to become a marketer, and I learned on the job. And And I look at, the world we're in today, and, I just hope that folks are lucky enough to have that opportunity. But more importantly, if you don't, that there are platforms like us, and there are that just give you that opportunity to replicate that environment so that you can have a more, material impact globally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my journey was somewhat similar to yours. I was a journalist major, and then I took a couple CS courses and started out in web development, and then found myself into marketing somehow. So funny how we both kind of arrived at the same endpoint from maybe different paths. So talk to me about some of the technology that you guys use at Udacity, right? Your MarTech stack, your other parts of your technology to actually enable this, right? Because this is not easy. This is a big challenge where you can provide this type of level of interaction to all of your students at scale, right? At the millions level. So walk me through some of that, and maybe provide some advice onto people that maybe aren't at the same stage you guys are with their technology, maybe want to get there.
Yeah, I think messaging and interaction was critical to sort of our platform, right? So we are sort of a Blueshift client, but we between that and we have a chat tool and intercom. So what you quickly realize that you want to reach the users through the channel that sort of engages them. I think it's easy when they're online and they're learning, right? So at point of purchase, people are super excited. They provide their sort of onboarding, like learner survey of their interests and information, right? But then from there, I think what you do with the information is critical, right? So, understanding what their sort of like learning objectives and goals are. We leverage chat with our what we call sort of like education specialists and people that are like browsing to sort of understand the distinction of ours,
Right.
to help them find the right program for them, because there's a proliferation of options now, and develop potentially a learning path that they may be comfortable in. And then from a personalization perspective with regards to recommendations, once they complete their sort of initial mandatory, or even like an introductory course, like what are the different paths and what would be relevant to you, or what do people like you that have graduated or completed that course or the degree, what should be important to them, right? And then we do a lot of analytics to sort of identify, and we leverage our data science team to identify what are those critical points of our moments of truth that make sure that people are keeping along those lines. So getting that first project submission is critical to sort of like driving engagement. Graduation will have a critical impact on whether they'll see a positive career outcome from being on our platform, right? And I would sort of say it's a combination of capturing the data up front, leveraging our tools like Blueshift and intercom to sort of communicate with users through SMS, through email, through chat. And then the analytics sort of platform that we have is important to sort of glean insights and democratize the information that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, and you talk about these different platforms, from a messaging component, right? Like Blueshift and Intercom, and how you can talk to customers, whether they're in the platform or whether outside the platform, and the best way of doing that. How important do you think it is, Blueshift as a CDP, captures all the customer data, right? It's like the full profile of the customer, and then you can use that. How valuable is that when you're starting to do these things to make sure that you can continue to engage with customers along the journey?
Critical, right? Because I think as a marketer, you want to democratize communication channels or access to that customer for your marketers, right? And the more they're relying on engineering or other tools or other platforms to get to that point, one, I think, is the access, and then two are the insights, right? By having sort of CDP and sort of and accelerating, these are the segments or type of individuals you want to touch is important. And then finally, if you learned anything, if you're just relying on email, even at industry best open rates, you're only touching like third to 40% of your population, right? So with regards to re-engagement, leveraging a platform like Blueshift to be able to go back and remarket to users that aren't opening their emails, right? Or extracting that information to target them in direct mail for re-engagement or and such is critical.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think about the journey of a student that takes a course at Udacity. Obviously, there's this they're excited at the beginning. They get super stoked. They go through maybe a couple lessons. But I imagine that there's some point some students may just get sidetracked, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they don't do that third lesson or fourth lesson. Maybe things get in the way, or they just like, oh man, that one was really hard. I don't know if I can do the next lesson. And they kind of sidetracked, and maybe they start waning, and like, maybe are they going to complete, are they going to finish? What are some ways that you guys target those people to say, oh shoot, this person looks like they're starting to churn, or not necessarily churn as far as not be a customer anymore, but not complete the course, right? And they start to kind of fall out. What do you do? What are some of the tactics you have to like bring them back, get them
Yeah.
re-engaged, get
We
them
have, we have inactivity re-engagement emails, right? Where we re-engage with the users to get them to sort of like to go back and sort of get within the classroom. And we sort of like optimized, with the help of Blueshift to sort of identify when are the right intervals,
right,
right, to get them before your point of pass no return, right? So we'll send it
right,
at day 4, day 8, day 11, and day 20, right? Where the message will vary, and we test and optimize it too. So we don't want it to be a blunt force instrument sort of saying, hey, you haven't logged in 4 days. How's it going?
right.
Like, I think there's a lot of care and testing the team put into that. And they sound like to be very arbitrary intervals, but there was a lot of thought that went into
Yeah,
that,
right.
right? And then even optimizing for like send time based on the individual, and what likelihood they have to sort of open emails. For some people they're morning folks, and some people they're afternoon. I think is critical.
And how important is that? I mean, a lot of the old thinking in marketing is generally like batch and blast, right? And we still hear that from time to time of, just load everyone up and just send them something. You mentioned earlier, well, you only get 30% of your best, right? So even that is a failed approach or a flawed approach. But what about the nuances that you just talked about, right? Making sure that the intervals are right, making sure that the personalization is right, making sure the timing is right.
Yeah.
How should someone that's not at the level of Udacity, how should they think about that and the value that those types of insights and signals have on your ultimate outcomes?
You got to understand your business model and your user, right? And what's important to them, right? And I have a big background, let's sort of say e-commerce, travel, and other areas, right? And there's always those rule of thumbs: Monday morning's best, don't ever send after Thursday, and then
Sure.
mobile's greater for that, and so forth. But like, you realize is that people are taking our courses on their own time, right? And then evenings are probably a high point of engagement for them. If
Right.
you're hitting them in the middle of a workday
Right.
to open something when they're not thinking about the platform, they're thinking about how to pay their bills, right? It's probably not going to be very effective. So I think there is some nuance. Like, there's just general rule of thumb and best practices when it comes
Yeah.
to best batch and blast, particularly when you're talking about the commerce perspective. But usage engagement, I think, like, you have to put yourself in the shoe of your user, right? And when is it going to be top of mind for them?
Right.
Right, just like like any sort of CPG product, and when you want to sort of influence, let's sort of say I'm Instacart, and you're thinking about shopping, that's
Right.
probably typically happen on the weekends and sort of like late afternoons.
Yeah.
While for like e-commerce, early Monday morning, surprisingly, most people will do their shopping in the middle of the workday.
Right.
Like, for us, the context is different.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you miss it, right, you miss the window. It's not like they remember you, right? Like, if you send them a message at the wrong interval when their mind is focused on work or shopping or taking care of the kids, they're not focused on completing the course or logging back in Udacity. It's not like they remember 8 hours later to go back, right? It's you kind of miss that interval, and so getting that timing is so right?
Yeah. And if you look at open rates as the only example, like, they might get drowned out in a few percentage points when, like, the click-through rates, that sort of that material difference in engagement is going to show up a lot larger,
Right.
if you're thoughtful about it, right? And don't carve up your test into two small segments.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so we talked about students to get them re-engaged, right? To
Yeah.
keep them on that course. And there's obviously a lot of they've already put money out there to do the course. So there's some of this like, hey, don't let the money go to waste, finish the course, get the nano degree that you signed up for, right? So there's a little bit of pain that they're associated with just kind of fully quitting, right? And not getting the realization. What about people that have done that first course, completed that first course, and now, you're trying to say, well, let's get you on that second course. Walk me through some of that, some of the things you guys do to get them to do that second course in short order. And have you found any kind of magic windows of like, hey, people that do a second course within a certain period of time are going to be very, very good long life Udacity customers? Or, if they don't, like, man, they'll never come back. Like, walk me through some of those engagement ideas and how you think about it.
Yeah, I would sort of say the course completion. One thing we try to be very, very mindful of is giving them some time for that to marinate, right? Because like it also depends on like where they are. If they're developing a new skill set, for, to see a positive career outcome, right? You have to wait, and like we'll do a graduation survey to our graduates 6 months after they left to just see, hey, are we having material impact? And right, for individual learners, like 70% of them report back that they're seeing a favorable outcome, either that they got a pay raise, they were able to get on a new project, they started a new job or started a new company, right? So there's a certain amount of time, particularly if that particular nano degree is the one that they were looking for to sort of launch them. And like that could be skillers, like a cab driver looking to become a web developer, right? Or a waiter trying to become a full stack developer. For the for the upskillers, individuals like who are looking to who are just intellectually curious and trying to build out their existing pathway, I think recommendations, right, around what's logical. Yeah. And leveraging some of our data science team to build some of those models to recommend courses based on what they've consumed before. We talked about some of the older trends, right? Like there's a proliferation of choice, not just in terms of learning providers, but content as well. Right. And even in a world like data science, like are there new are there new courses that you want to take? Do you want to specialize in AI? Do you want to go into RPA or a number of other sort of avenues? There's no shortage of choice. I think it's just a matter of condensing that down. Yeah, is important.
Yeah, because that is the problem that a lot of companies struggle with, right? Is they almost have too many choices, and then consumers really struggle when you have too many choices. It almost is worse than having no choices. And so how do you sift through all that? Because all consumers want some choice, they want some variability, but they want a finite number of choices that they don't have to.
It's a great suggestion, right? And I think that's one thing that we really focus on is that we've been very mindful of curating our content for the workplace and making sure that we have the right skill sets, right? So if you come to us and you want to learn JavaScript, there's one course for intro to JavaScript, intermediate JavaScript. You're not choosing like a marketplace from 50 different courses, hoping it's the right one for you. Right. What that allows us to do is not to sort of have people sift through the subject matter, but more focus on their outcomes, right? Yes. It's like, hey, do you want to be a full stack developer, or are you just writing scripts because you're a entrepreneur who just wants to do some web development for its website on the side?
Yeah, and that's great because you reduce the paradox of choice by focusing on the career pathing. And then
and then we sort of limit the amount of choices. Like we don't need to show you the whole category of nano degrees, right? It's a matter of, okay, if you've taken this course, here are 2 or 3 other logical choices or recommendations that we can provide to you.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So going back to, we know that Udacity has done a lot to like bring that human interaction to a digital presence, right? And we also know during this pandemic that not doing that is a very poor way of learning, right? Just like not just all on by your own is just, it's really hard. We've all, as parents, we've all experienced it, numerous times. And so Udacity's kind of figured out how to bridge that gap, provide that value. What are some of the risks, do you think, of other educational companies not kind of adjusting or not being willing to adjust to these new expectations of this online learning environment with like, tight interactivity?
Yeah, I think the two logical ones are churn, right? If you're a subscription company, that's like the four-lettered word, or or of death. Low graduation rates. I think when we talked about expectations, there's outcomes, right? And like, what is this education going to give to me? Like, even if it's a sourdough making class, or a sourdough starter class, you're going to want to know, like, how reliable is it? Like how what materials do I need? And like, what am I going to expect here? But like for us, I think it's a matter of giving confidence day one,
Yeah,
whether you are a current developer and you're learning a new skill set that you can apply in the workplace, or a matter of like, these aren't trivial costs that you're sort of like shelling out if we're dealing with people's livelihoods and their sort of long-term careers. So churn, low graduation rate, then and then just expensive traffic or increasing costs of traffic for you, right? It's like there are no shortage of options, right? And people will be more inclined to sort of try a free option if they're not if they're not driving the outcome for you. So if you with the proliferation of free options and access to free content, what you have to quickly realize is not all content's created equal, just like
right.
not all online learning providers are created equal. So you need to be very mindful of not just making the marketing claim, but sort of demonstrating how you're going to, like, what's materially different about your platform, right? That's going to help you learn. And for me, that analog of having that TA, right, in a
Yeah,
sort of like Uber like model where it's on demand,
yeah.
right, what was super critical for me.
And how do that's a great point you bring up. There's no shortage of options, right? You do a Google search, you go on, you can find like, hundreds of courses for learning JavaScript, or hundreds of ways to learn JavaScript. And some of them are free and some of them aren't. And some of them are someone's YouTube channel or whatever it is, right? There's just a lot of stuff out there from a content perspective. But at the end of the day, there's a variety of quality associated with that. And if you really are serious and you really want, if their real objective is to truly learn and truly use it as a stepping stone either in your career or potentially a pivot to your career, how do you guys make sure you stand out in that noise, right? Because obviously that's what Udacity provides. Udacity provides that career pivoting, career changing outcome
Yeah.
for people. So how do you guys stand out? How do you make sure that new customers that are looking for something you provide are aware of how you approach the issue and approach the problem, and glean that you're different? What are some ways you guys do that?
That's a great question. Like there's sort of five key questions that like I would sort of like ask people, or like four to five that I would ask people like when they come up with it. Like one is like, how do you ensure? I think the first is like thinking about our mission, right? And our mission is to train the world's workforce to careers of the future,
Yeah,
right? And what that sort of harkens to specifically is that we're getting people to be job ready for roles that we think are going to be in demand or continue to be in demand in the future. And that what should give you is the confidence, right, that you're investing your dollars in something that will have lasting impact, for your livelihood. Right. And then from there, okay, there are a number of like professional courses, certificate programs, master's degrees, everything you can take. Like, what's different about us? Like, one is like, how do you ensure your program, like, the platform is high quality and relevant to the workplace? And I think I talked about this. We spent 10 years focusing on a singular mission, and that was developing, right, teaching job ready digital skills online. We've done that for the last 10 years, and we've perfected, we've iterated. We didn't just do it out once. We didn't convert syllabi and put it out there, right? It's something that we continue to tinker with, like the learning methodology and the technologies to engage users. Separately, I spoke to this earlier, like we spend a lot of time, we curate our content. We develop one course for self-driving. We offer one course for introductory to JavaScript, right? And it's not a marketplace where we put the onus on the user to figure out what's right for them, because we're thinking about the resume and the role in the professional workplace as the starting point and work our ways backward. Right. And then finally, we work with practitioners and experts in the field, right? We launched our first Android developer nano degree with Google.
yeah.
right? We work with automotive and self-driving companies for the self-driving car. They're rooted in people who have to do this for a living and excel in it, as opposed to theory that sometimes, like you, the journalist, or me, the psychologist, like how are we going to apply that to roles? Or even like my, the CS course I took, it didn't tell me how to program a web page. I learned how to program blackjack as my first project. Right. Separately, like, I think this verification of skills, because we're rooted in digital technology, right, and leveraging the mentors to review that code and to help people who are like practitioners and experts in the field, and sort of say, yeah, that's a creative way to approach that. That may not be the right answer, but this person gets what they're talking about is critical, right? And building a network of that size so that you can have 24/7 access, and you have someone respond to you in less than an hour is really the expectations consumers have today, right? You can order a bottle of Gatorade and get it here in 30 minutes, or like whatever you want. Why wouldn't they expect the same in terms of human feedback for code review, right? And then, like, how are you making an impact? I talked about the 70% positive income up for individual learners. For our corporate clients, we do business impact reports on a quarterly basis to show how that learning is directly applying to their business. And then, like, how do you unblock users when they're stuck, right? And as opposed to the FAQ, it goes back to our mentors and then sort of helping you sort of address those problems, right? And then developing a peer network.
Yeah, it's so
is the final bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I love it. I think it's, at the end of the day, when someone has a need to learn, right, and they are willing to, commit the time, the biggest risk they have is they don't learn, right? They don't acquire the skill they're seeking out and spending so much time. And I think the way you've just presented mitigates that risk considerably. Right, you're worried that the risk of like, oh, I'm learning something, but is it really applicable in the real world? Well, yes, it is. And here's someone that's in the real world doing the job you want to do, telling you it's really
yeah, right. Yeah, content co-created from leaders of the field,
right,
specialized for the workplace, right, and then people who are actually doing that job or applying those skills or expert in those skills, helping you along the way.
Yeah,
I can't think of a sort of more pragmatic combination, right, of that sort of that level of interaction and verification that like is replicated, right, in the marketplace today.
Yeah, and essentially it's like the old apprenticeship model, right, where people used to go and learn at the hands of the master of craft, was tied with like the traditional literature, all married in one digital interactive platform, right?
Yeah.
It just means that you can work on your own pace, right? And you can kind of go and do it based on your own schedule. It seems like you've combined a lot of the needs from someone to really get the true learning and provide it in a way that's simple for them to follow and simple for them to get successful, which is, no doubt why, 70% of the graduates actually see an impact, right? See a positive impact. That's amazing, right? I mean, that's a astonishing statistic. So cool. All right, we only have time for a couple more questions. I wanted to get your perspective on this. So you talked about, if you don't do some of this stuff, you don't do that relevance, you don't change, you're going to be left behind, right? You're going to be obsolete. There's a lot of options out there, and if you're the company that's just kind of like, well, we're not going to pivot, we're not going to embrace this, you may not be around much longer. So what's your advice for someone that says, hey, I want to embrace this, I want to change, I don't know where to start, I don't know how to do it, like my company isn't Udacity, we didn't think about this, we're different than you guys. What is your advice for them? Someone that has that desire to change but isn't sure where to start and how to do it.
Yeah, I think first, like work backwards, right, and look at, I guess I'll sort of look at it from two different perspectives, right? For other educational companies out there thinking about it, right? Like, think again about like focus on driving outcomes, right, and hold yourself and your colleagues accountable. That's something, graduation rates and focusing on making an impact was something that was always been paramount here, and a non-negotiable, right? think about the applicability of the content you're creating,
Yeah.
right? And then on top of that, monitor your engagement data closely, right? And keep yourself honest on what's relevant. Technology is changing over and over on a regular basis, right? Even like something our digital marketing course, right? Like little nuances in the Google and Facebook platform maybe sort of relevant a year ago, right? But anyone who's been a practitioner in digital marketing knows that platform changes on a quarterly basis, right? So you have to go back and refresh your content, right? So, like core basics in accounting is something that, you might not have to change the theory of, in 5 years, even if the book publishers are refreshing that content to sell new versions, right? But it's actually meaningful in the professional environment, and particularly digital, right? Like, technologies that are relevant today, or platforms that you're applying those technologies today may be applicable, but have changed dramatically in the span of 24 months. You have to go back and reinvest and upgrade that content. And then like help connect the dots on like how your courses builds and leads to outcomes, right? Like we ran that survey to learn whether whether students are delivering that. We were pleasantly surprised to see that 70% stat around positive outcomes, right? But we didn't go in thinking that, particularly, we were hopeful, but we didn't know what to expect, right? But I think that was reassuring. But for the data points that aren't, right, dig deeper. So you do that first wave, and then iterate, and then talk to those customers and try to understand their expectations and what drives them. And I think that's what was critical for us. We have certain learners who are very advanced and are just intellectually curious, and they want to be left alone, right? And they'll complete their course on their own.
Right.
There are others that are starting from ground zero and they'll have no idea where to start, right? And how do you capture that information of that user and then align their expectations to that outcome to best help them succeed?
Yeah. Well, okay. So last question for you, Kenny, and thank you so much. This has been super helpful and super interesting to hear your thoughts and how Udacity approaches some of these challenges. So what does the future look like? So we saw the last 2 years has been a major step change in expectations. What does the future look like from your perspective?
I think it's tough to say what does the future look like, because I don't have the crystal ball. I think the way I would answer is like, what does the future need to be?
Yeah. Right.
Is like, I feel like this space, needs to mature. There needs to be broader acceptance, from Capitol Hill and across the globe in terms of usage and engagement, right? For the people that are doing it, I think they're seeing the material outcomes. But if you look at the increase in demand of job creation that's going to happen due to automation, like there's news articles all the time that talk about how automation and AI and ML is going to eliminate certain jobs. What you don't necessarily talk to is that the amount of jobs that are created from those technologies is going to dwarf the jobs that are lost due to automation. Right. And the onus is on all of us, and like our platform and others, to sort of give people the means, right, to sort of to learn these new technologies so that they can be sort of prosperous in their careers, right, in their livelihood. And the stat that sort of speaks to that increase in demand in jobs due to automation and AI relative to the elimination of jobs, what you quickly realize is that the university system alone isn't going to close the gap on that increase. And thankfully, they're investing in ways to sort of make those sort of offerings more available. But I guess the predictions I would make is, one, online learning, for my son's generation will probably be one of many choices to sort of develop skills. Two, developing skills versus degrees is going to be critical. Three, the need for continuous and ongoing learning is something that people are going to recognize with regards to careers or so forth, right? And then four, my challenge and mandate, more broadly, is that we accelerate funding, right, from a federal and foundation perspectives into these programs to get more people into roles that will align themselves to where the demand is in the future.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I love those predictions, and I guess we'll wait and see. But I agree. I think it'll be an exciting time to see a lot of those things manifest. Well, Kenny, thanks again for the time and for all of your insights. This has been a fun conversation, and hopefully everyone that was watching gleaned a lot from this, and hopefully you figure out the next steps to get your company in the right spot and get your organization in the right spot to capture new demand and new expectations as customers' expectations continue to change with the new world and new technology that continues to come up. Thanks again, Kamini, and thanks so much for watching.
Thanks so much, Josh. Always a pleasure.